This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
Across the stage and run out sobbing, but I'm surrounded by hairy creatures and can't leave. At this moment, I need to go on stage, decked out in a crazy costume complete with a pig nose a la Miss Piggy. Did I mention I'm pretending to be Miss Piggy and I'm singing a duet with Kermit the Frog? As I move away from Snuffy's legs and look up at him, he is sympathetically blinking his huge eyelashes at me. The stage manager can tell that something is wrong as I wipe tears from my face, but he has no choice other than to cue the Muppet Rock Band to file onto the stage and then point at me for my entrance. As they say, the show must go on. I had always wanted to have children, and like most people, I just assumed it would happen when the time was right. My parents were divorced when I was quite young, and my mom never remarried. I was an only child in my mother's house, and I used to beg her to adopt a baby. I desperately wanted a brother or a sister to play with and take care of. My mother never did adopt a child, but my father remarried. Because my stepmother already had 2 children from a previous marriage, I had instant siblings. Then, luckily for me, my dad and my stepmother added 3 wonderful daughters to the family. As a result, I was able to maintain a privileged only child status with my mom, while enjoying being part of a larger family with my dad. Years have a way of flying by, and before I knew it, my 4 years of college were over. Since I had been working basically since I was 11 months old, I significantly cut back on the number of jobs I took while I was at school. It was a much-needed break. I graduated with a degree in French literature, and then went back to working full-time. After a few years of living on my own in Manhattan, I met, dated, and subsequently married my first husband, Andre Agassi. We were busy with our individual careers, and our schedules often conflicted. Though we both wanted to have children, the appropriate time never seemed to present itself. Even though a great deal of love existed between the 2 of us, over time, our lives seemed to become polarized, and after 2 years, our marriage ended. It was a sad but amicable parting, and it was a blessing that no children were involved. The real blessing, however, was that I was able to meet and fall in love with Chris Henchy, a comedy writer. To this day, I believe I fell in love with Chris the day we met in 1999, but I would never tell him that. I had just gotten an American bulldog, Darla, and I brought her to meet friends of mine in the gym on the Warner Brothers lot. While there, the dog wandered off, and Chris brought her back. He was writing for a show filmed on the lot and loved dogs. We chatted, and he made me laugh. I left without even knowing his full name, but he made such a strong impression that I called up a friend and told her I had found a guy I thought she should go out with. She told me she had started seeing someone else. Because I had recently gotten divorced, I wasn't even considering dating. 3 weeks later, I was hosting a show in Washington, D.C., for which Chris was the writer, and we started spending time together and became friends. I was struck by how thoughtful and funny he was. Because he knew my situation, there was no pressure, and we were just friends for quite some time. Finally, though, I had to admit that there was something between us that I could no longer ignore, and we started dating. Although we were each consumed by our individual jobs, he with writing and I with the last season of Suddenly Susan, we were both also quite ready to start a family. Chris and I dated for 2 years and then became engaged. I was so clear about wanting to have children with this man that I would have gladly adjusted our plans if it happened before we were married. Though we didn't specifically try to have a baby, I chose to go off the pill. As the wedding approached, however, I wasn't getting pregnant. It crossed our minds that there might be something wrong. Wanting everything to be in order before we got married, we decided to see a fertility specialist in Los Angeles named Dr. Joyce Vargas. She performed several tests and an examination, determining that changes in my cervix were probably the reason why I wasn't getting pregnant. Several years before, I had had cervical surgery to remove precancerous cells, resulting in scarring that caused my cervix to be tight and significantly shortened. As a result, the entrance to my uterus had become severely impeded, making it very difficult for me to get pregnant. In the process of removing the precancerous cells, the surgery also removed the cervical glands that secrete the mucus necessary to transport the sperm. Without this bodily fluid, the little spermies, as one of the nurses affectionately called them, couldn't swim upstream. I said, "No wonder it hasn't been working." Not only is the door closed, but the poor guys have been jumping into a pool with no water. Dr. Vargas reassured us that this was one of the easiest fertility issues to overcome, though she did mention the possibility of my cervix becoming incompetent during pregnancy and prematurely opening up. After hearing the word incompetent, I couldn't help feeling like damaged goods. With a very serious expression, Chris said to my physician, "Please, doctor, we don't like to use the word incompetent in our house. Could you just say she has a special cervix, or that she is simply cervically challenged?" We decided to try artificial insemination. In this procedure, which is done at the time of ovulation, the doctor inserts a catheter into the vagina, bypassing the scarred and narrowed tissue and putting the sperm directly into the uterus. Medically, it wasn't any different from having sex, at least from the sperm and eggs point of view. Chris begged to differ. After a couple of attempts, I still wasn't knocked up. The doctor kept saying that it was the scarring on my cervix that was creating the difficulty and repeatedly making insemination unsuccessful. My eggs themselves were looking very young and healthy. I was a fertile female. That it was suggested that even the thinnest catheter could not place the stuff where it needed to be. I tried to find comfort in the fact that at least my eggs were in good shape. Soon, Chris and I were given some additional surprising news. My doctor indicated that because of my age, I didn't have the luxury of time. She tactfully said that my biological clock was ticking, and that it not only took time to have children, but if we wanted more than one, we needed to think about a more aggressive approach. The next step should be an in vitro fertilization procedure. IVF, I blurted out. Isn't that for older women? I'm only 36. You said I was fertile and healthy. I admit it was strange being informed that I was almost too old for something when I was in good shape and felt like a spring chicken. Undergoing IVF would mean enduring an involved and arduous series of procedures. It entailed drugs, shots, and surgery. This was quite upsetting to us, but it looked like we didn't have a choice. Chris and I figured that if this was indeed the path we needed to take, then we would have to mentally and physically prepare for it. We spent a lot of time educating ourselves about the entire process. At first, I shared this news only with a friend who had gone through IVF herself and was currently pregnant. She was so positive about the whole thing that we were encouraged. Soon we told our parents that we were availing ourselves of modern medicine and that they would get a grandchild out of it. Meanwhile, Dr. Vargas was convinced that we would have our baby in no time. Around this time, I was offered the chance to play Sally Bowles, the lead character in Cabaret on Broadway. Sally and I could not have been more opposite. In the play, she becomes pregnant by accident and is forced to make a crucial decision. I was trying to get pregnant, and if it were to happen, it would be anything but an accident. Still, the focus on babies and births struck me as ironic. However, I couldn't survive 8 shows a week for 6 months if I did get pregnant. I was not going to be that method. So I, too, had a choice to make. Chris and I discussed what a wonderful and rewarding opportunity doing such a tough play would be, and we felt it would be good for me to take the job. We had not yet begun IVF, and the wedding was getting close. Once all the festivities had passed and my run in the play was over, I could then begin the fertility treatments. We thought this new schedule was going to work perfectly. I accepted the part with excitement and a healthy fear. It would be the most challenging role I had ever taken, and I was invigorated by the prospect of playing it. I decided I would use my time wisely. I would get myself into the best possible shape for the character and fully commit to the experience of Cabaret. On May 26, 2001, Chris and I were married in Palm Beach, Florida. My dad, who lived there and had been diagnosed with late-stage prostate cancer, was unable to travel because of his chemotherapy treatments. So we decided to forego getting married in New York, as originally planned, and invited a smaller group of people to travel to Florida, where we got married at the home of my father's close friend facing the ocean. The wedding was everything we had hoped for. The ceremony was timed for sunset, and as it began, Tuck and Patty, a powerful musical team whom I have loved and followed for years, performed Heaven Down Here. We had written our own vows, and the service was intimate and spiritual without being heavy. By the time we got to the reception, when our comedian friends were trying to top one another in the joke department during their toasts, everyone was smiling. After dinner, we had our first dance as Mr. and Mrs. And then I danced with my father. It was the last time I would ever dance with him, and I cherish the photo I have of us. The next day,